This testimony was recorded secretly in a hidden location by a man who, according to many authorities, should not exist. My name is Sheikh Tariq ibn Rashid al-Hashimi. For many years, I served as a Grand Imam at the Grand Mosque in Mecca, Masjid al-Haram, the most sacred site in the Islamic world. For decades, I preached Islam to millions. But something happened that changed everything. On November 17, 2023, during Friday prayer, I died. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, medically. For 48 hours, I had no heartbeat, no brain activity, and no breathing. Doctors declared me clinically dead. Yet during those 48 hours, I experienced something that has made me one of the most hunted men in parts of the Islamic world. Because when I died, I saw something. Not just the afterlife. I was shown a vision of the future. Specifically the year 2026. A moment that will take place above the Kaaba itself. What I witnessed has caused authorities in several countries to try to silence me before the world hears this testimony. This video could disappear tomorrow. But if you are hearing it now, perhaps it is because you were meant to hear it. It was a normal Friday in Mecca. The Grand Mosque was overflowing with worshippers. Tens of thousands of Muslims dressed in white robes filled the courtyard and prayer halls. It was Jummah prayer, the most important weekly gathering in Islam. As Grand Imam, I stood on the marble platform overlooking the massive crowd. Nearly 150,000 men had gathered for prayer, shoulder to shoulder. Beyond them stretched the courtyards of the mosque. And behind me stood the Kaaba, the black cube draped in embroidered gold cloth that Muslims around the world face when they pray. For 15 years, I had stood in that exact place delivering sermons. My words were broadcast through loudspeakers across Mecca and through satellite television to millions of viewers worldwide. That day's sermon was about tawakkul, trusting completely in Allah. I spoke passionately to the crowd. When a believer places full trust in Allah, I said, he finds peace. When you trust God's plan, you fear nothing. Not poverty, not suffering, not even death. Looking back now, the irony of those words chills me. I had been speaking for about 45 minutes when it happened. Suddenly, I felt pressure in my chest. At first it was small. Then it became crushing. It felt as though an invisible hand had gripped my heart and was squeezing it with tremendous force. My voice faltered. I gripped the wooden pulpit to steady myself. The pain exploded through my chest, shooting down my left arm and up into my jaw. My breathing became heavy. The microphone captured every labored breath and broadcast it across the entire mosque. The crowd fell silent. Then the pain became unbearable. My vision blurred. I remember the microphone slipping from my hand. It crashed onto the marble floor. And I collapsed. The last sensations I remember from my physical body were strange details. The smell of oud incense burning somewhere nearby. The cold touch of marble against my cheek. And the sound of tens of thousands of people gasping at the same time. Then everything went dark. Security guards rushed to my side almost immediately. They found me unconscious. My lips had already turned blue. They checked for a pulse. There was none. CPR began instantly while another guard called for the medical team stationed at the mosque. Meanwhile, chaos erupted among the worshippers. Some people tried to push forward to see what was happening. Others fell to their knees praying loudly. Parents covered their children's eyes. The call to prayer echoed through the minarets of Mecca, strangely calm against the panic unfolding below. Paramedics loaded my body into an ambulance. Sirens screamed through the streets as they rushed me to King Abdullah Medical City. All the way there, medics performed chest compressions. But my heart never restarted. When we arrived at the hospital, a full medical team was already waiting. The head of cardiology, Dr. Faisal Al-Khatani, had watched my collapse on live television. They rushed me into the trauma room. Defibrillators shocked my chest. Once. Twice. 3 times. Nothing. They administered powerful drugs. They continued compressions. They tried every advanced medical procedure available. Still nothing. Finally, at 12:47 p.m., 1 hour after my collapse, Dr. Faisal made the decision no doctor ever wants to make. He removed his gloves, looked at the clock, and spoke the words. Time of death, 12:47 p.m., November 17th, 2023. My body lay still on the hospital bed. A nurse gently pulled a white sheet over my face. 20 minutes later, my wife arrived. Her name is Layla. When she saw the sheet covering my face, she screamed. It was the sound of someone's entire world collapsing. My eldest son, Nasir, tried to support her as she nearly collapsed. Tears streamed silently down his face. My other children arrived shortly afterward. In our culture, men are expected to remain composed even in grief. But their red eyes and shaking hands betrayed their pain. My daughter Safia sat beside my body, holding my cold hand while whispering prayers. Layla placed her hands gently over the sheet covering my face. For 32 years we had shared life together. We had raised children. We had watched grandchildren grow. And now she believed I was gone. Please don't leave me, she whispered. Please. I heard every word. Because I was still there. But not in the way you might think. I was no longer in my body. Instead, I was floating near the ceiling of the hospital room, fully conscious. In fact, my awareness was clearer than it had ever been during life. I could see everything. My body lying on the hospital bed. The doctors speaking quietly in the hallway. The nurses completing paperwork. My grieving family. Everything. I tried to speak to Layla. I tried to reach for her hand. But when I did, my hand passed through hers like mist. That was the moment fear truly struck me. I was dead. Medically. Completely. Yet according to everything I had taught for 40 years, this should not have been possible. Islam teaches that when a person dies, the soul enters a state of waiting in the grave until the day of judgment. But I was not asleep. I was fully conscious. Aware. Watching. And a terrifying thought began forming in my mind. If Islam was wrong about this, what else might it be wrong about? Time behaved strangely after death. I could not feel hours passing in a normal way. But somehow I knew time was moving. My body was transferred to the hospital morgue. In Islamic tradition, burial usually happens within 24 hours. But because I was the Grand Imam, government officials wanted time to organize ceremonies. So my body remained there. For 48 hours. I watched my family come and go. I watched Layla age years in a matter of days from grief. I watched my son struggle to appear strong. I watched my daughter cry alone in a hospital bathroom where no one else could see. Religious leaders arrived. Men I had worked with for decades. They discussed how to explain my death publicly. How to frame it as part of Allah's plan. How to avoid questions. Meanwhile, the news spread across the Muslim world. Millions mourned. Millions prayed for my soul. But I could not hear any answer to those prayers. Then, after what felt like 2 full days, something changed. I felt a pull. It was powerful. Like gravity had suddenly reversed direction. Something beyond this world was calling me. I tried to resist. But resistance was impossible. The hospital room dissolved around me. Earth itself seemed to disappear. And I was pulled toward something far greater. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand who I was before the day I died. Because my entire identity was built on Islam. I was born in Mecca in 1965 into the respected Al-Hashimi family, a lineage that traces its ancestry back to the same clan as the Prophet Muhammad. In our culture, heritage like that is not simply a matter of pride. It is almost a destiny. My father, Rashid al-Hashimi, was a respected Islamic scholar. From the earliest days of my childhood, religion was the center of our lives. My earliest memories are of sitting beside him in his study surrounded by shelves filled with ancient religious books. The room always smelled of old paper, leather bindings, and mint tea. My father would recite verses from the Quran in a voice that made the words sound like music. When I was 9 years old, I memorized the entire Quran. All 114 chapters. More than 6,000 verses. When I completed the memorization, my father wept with pride. Our community celebrated. From that moment forward, people believed I was destined for a life of religious leadership. And I believed it too. Serving Allah perfectly became the goal of my life. At the age of 18, I left Mecca to study at Al-Azhar University in Cairo, one of the most respected centers of Islamic scholarship in the world. For 5 years, I immersed myself in religious study. I studied hadith science, the complex discipline of verifying the sayings of the Prophet. I studied Islamic law and jurisprudence. I studied Arabic linguistics, theology, and centuries of scholarly interpretation. After that, I continued my education at the Islamic University of Medina, where I completed my doctorate. My doctoral thesis focused on the chain of transmission of prophetic traditions, proving the reliability of the sayings attributed to Muhammad. 300 pages of detailed research. The work was published and widely praised. Doors began to open for me. When I was 28 years old, I returned to Mecca and married Layla, the daughter of a teacher. She was intelligent, deeply religious, and devoted to our family. Together we built a life. 4 children were born into our home: Nasir, Zakaria, Idris, and our youngest, Safia. We raised them in the shadow of the Kaaba itself. From their earliest years, they learned to pray before they could even write. My career grew steadily. At first, I taught small groups of students in the courtyards of the Grand Mosque after the early morning prayers. But gradually my reputation expanded. People respected my sermons. My knowledge of scripture grew widely known. Over the next 2 decades, I wrote 12 books explaining Islamic teachings. They were distributed across many Muslim countries and read by hundreds of thousands of believers. Eventually, I was appointed as one of the leading imams at the Grand Mosque in Mecca. Standing before tens of thousands of worshippers each Friday became part of my life. My voice was broadcast across the Muslim world. People trusted my words. Young students memorized my sermons. Families discussed my teachings at their dinner tables. By every visible measure, I had built the perfect Islamic life. Or so I believed. Looking back now, I can see something I refused to admit at the time. There were cracks in my certainty, moments when doubts tried to surface. But every time they appeared, I pushed them away. One moment still stands out in my memory. 3 years before my death, a young university student came to see me. His hands were trembling. He confessed that he had been reading about Christianity. He said he had discovered contradictions that troubled him. He asked difficult questions about the Quran's description of Jesus. At the time, I responded with authority. I quoted verses. I cited religious scholars. Eventually, the student left my office convinced, at least outwardly, that his doubts had been answered. But later that night, alone in my study, his questions echoed in my mind. What if he was right? What if some of our teachings were incomplete? I forced those thoughts away. I prayed longer prayers. I read more scripture. Eventually the doubts faded. Or at least I convinced myself they had. Then there were the dreams. 3 times during the year before my death, I had the same strange dream. In the dream, I was standing in the courtyard of the Grand Mosque looking at the Kaaba. Suddenly a brilliant figure in white appeared above it. His arms were extended outward. Each time I woke up suddenly with my heart racing. But I could never remember the face clearly. I told no one about those dreams. I dismissed them as imagination. There was also a meeting that disturbed me more than I admitted. At an interfaith conference in Dubai, I had dinner with an Arab Christian man from Lebanon named Boutros. We spoke for hours about theology. But something about the way he spoke about Jesus unsettled me. He spoke not as someone discussing a distant prophet from history. He spoke as though Jesus were alive. At one point I asked him why he spoke with such personal certainty. He looked at me calmly and said something I never forgot. He is alive, Boutros said. He died and rose again. And he knows you, Sheikh Tariq. He is calling you. I laughed at the time, but his words stayed with me. Still, I ignored every warning sign, because questioning Islam would have cost me everything. My reputation, my position, my family's honor, my entire identity. So I buried the questions. Until the day I died. The force pulling me away from Earth grew stronger. Everything physical faded away. I was moving through something that resembled a tunnel of light. But it was not peaceful. The light exposed every hidden part of me. Every moment of pride disguised as humility. Every judgment I had made against others. Every hidden thought. Nothing could be concealed. Behind me I could hear distant voices, prayers being spoken for my soul. But those prayers felt strangely empty. It was as if they were spoken into silence. For the first time in my life, a frightening question formed in my mind. What if Allah was not there to hear them? Eventually the tunnel opened into something beyond description. It felt like standing in an infinite realm filled with living light. The light itself seemed aware, holy, pure. And in that moment I understood something I had never fully grasped during my life. Absolute holiness cannot coexist with sin. Every sin I had ever committed was suddenly visible to me. Not simply remembered, experienced. I realized something terrifying. No human being could stand in that kind of purity without guilt. All my prayers, all my fasting, all my teaching, none of it erased the truth that I was imperfect. An imperfection cannot survive in absolute holiness. I felt the crushing weight of guilt. And then I heard a voice. Tariq. It was not loud, yet it filled everything. I turned toward the source of the voice, and I saw him. Standing within the light was a figure I immediately recognized. Jesus. Not simply a prophet, not merely a messenger, but something far greater. His presence radiated both love and authority. His hands bore visible scars, the wounds of crucifixion. At that moment, I understood something that shattered everything I had believed. The crucifixion had happened. Jesus had died, and he was alive. The realization overwhelmed me. For decades, I had taught millions of people that Jesus was not divine. Yet here I stood before him. I'm sorry, I whispered. The words barely formed. I didn't know. His voice was calm but filled with truth. You knew enough to seek, he said. And then I saw moments from my life replayed. Moments when truth had quietly reached out to me. Questions I had ignored. Doubts I had buried. Every opportunity one had to search deeper. I realized something painful. I had avoided the truth because I was afraid of losing everything. Then everything changed again. Suddenly I was looking down at earth. Specifically at Mecca. The Grand Mosque stood below us, filled with worshippers during the month of Ramadan. Millions of people were gathered for night prayers. Rows of worshippers bowed in synchronized movement. It was a scene I had witnessed hundreds of times. Then the sky above the Kaaba began to glow. A brilliant light appeared, brighter than any natural light. And within that light, a figure appeared. Jesus, standing above the Kaaba, visible to the entire crowd. The prayer stopped instantly. Confusion spread through the worshippers. Some people fell to the ground in awe. Others tried to run. Phones appeared everywhere as people began recording what they saw. And Jesus spoke. I am Jesus Christ, the voice declared. The Son of God. I died for your sins. I rose again. I am the way, the truth, and the life. The message echoed across the entire crowd. Within seconds, the moment was being broadcast across the world. Millions would witness it, and the world would never be the same. After the vision ended, Jesus looked at me again. You must return, he said. You must tell them what you have seen. Then everything collapsed back into darkness. Suddenly pain exploded through my body. My lungs burned as air rushed back in. I gasped violently. Hospital machines began beeping. Doctors rushed into the room in shock. I had been declared dead for 48 hours. Yet now my heart was beating again. Against all medical explanation, I had returned to life. When I told my family what I had experienced, everything fell apart. My wife was terrified. My sons rejected what I said. Only my daughter Safia listened without anger. 6 weeks later, I returned to the Grand Mosque to preach again. But this time my message was different. I told the crowd everything. I spoke about Jesus. I spoke about the vision of 2026. Security guards rushed the platform before I could finish. Within hours, I was arrested. Religious authorities accused me of apostasy. Eventually, they released me under house arrest and declared me mentally unstable. But recordings of my sermon had already spread across the internet. Millions heard what I said. My marriage ended. My sons rejected me. I lost my position and reputation. But I could not deny the truth I had seen. With help from underground Christian networks and my daughter Safia, I escaped the country. Now I live in hiding, waiting, watching, because the year 2026 is approaching, and the vision I was shown is drawing closer.